your brain, change your income, and obviously change your life, and then eliminate limitations and get rid of the obstacles, and become unstoppable. So as it relates to self-sabotage, what are the different ways that you and I and everybody who's watching self-sabotage our success possibilities?
This is a really great question. And I think when we look back on our own lives and the ways that we have approached opportunities, we might see certain things. We might see certain patterns, like stopping short of creating that grand goal for yourself. Because if you don't set that goal, then you can't disappoint yourself if you don't achieve it. It could be setting that goal, but then talking yourself out of it. Like, there's no way I can do this, or there's no way I can pull this off, right? That negative self-talk can become so real and actually then create these self-fulfilling prophecies. It might mean that you take a couple of steps forward and then you start thinking too big. You start thinking about, well, what am I going to do to continue along this path? It's going to be so hard. I can't keep up this progress for another 10 months or a year. And then you stop, you sabotage your own actions. Sometimes that's even subconscious. It could be that you're in a relationship you're not happy about, or a job that you're not happy about, but in your mind you're thinking, but it's good enough. And what if I put myself out there and it's even worse? So I'd rather just stay here because it's safe, right? These are the kinds of things that we might tell ourselves that end up stopping us from being able to realize those bigger dreams.
I love it. And you reminded me of something that I learned many, many years ago, is that in many cases, we rationalize, which simply means we tell ourselves rational lies. And that holds us back and it holds us hostage. So if somebody wants to, let me back up for a moment. Do you believe it's possible, with the right, whether it's techniques and skills, for somebody to change their brain so they can change their income and maybe their life? Is it possible, first and foremost?
Absolutely possible, and a very realistic goal for everyone.
Got it. Okay. So when we're talking about changing your brain and specifically self-sabotage, are there a couple of techniques that somebody could be using starting today? They're at home right now watching the Brainathon. They say, this makes sense. What can they be doing? Let's talk about one or two techniques, and then we'll dive deeper.
Well, first, it's important to find out why you self-sabotage, and everyone's reasons is different. And I created an acronym as a shorthand to understand the main factors that could stop somebody from reaching their ultimate goals. And the acronym is LIFE. L stands for low or shaky self-esteem. I stands for internalized beliefs from childhood. F stands for fear of the unknown, or fear of anything that you can or cannot change in your perception. And E stands for excessive need for control. Once you know that, it's then really important to examine your thoughts, because our thoughts have patterns. And what we don't realize is that when we have a negative emotion, or there's an action that we wish we didn't do, and we look back and we say, oh, why did I do that? If you rewind just a bit, you'll realize that there's always a thought that drove that emotion or that action. But sometimes we don't notice the thought. We just notice the outcome and we say, we don't like this outcome, right? So it's really important then to examine your thinking and get into the habit of that. Don't be afraid of your thoughts, because we all have them. We have more than 50,000 thought fragments a day on average. So start getting to know your thoughts, and don't let it be in auto drive. Really take it out. Put it in manual drive, right? Really examine your thoughts. And then from there, you'll know how to act. There's a number of different techniques from there that can really help us to retool our thinking in a practical way and to move us towards success.
I love it. So LIFE. And so the L is for limited self-image or self-esteem. Is that right?
Yes.
The I is, one more time,
internalized beliefs from childhood.
Internalized beliefs from childhood. And they could be negative, disempowering, destructive beliefs that limit us, or they could be constructive, empowering, positive beliefs, right?
Exactly. There could be a combination of both. And most of the times we learn these beliefs from our early childhood experiences, or from the adults that were the most influential to us, whether it's our parents, other caregivers, teachers, coaches, people we look up to, right? Think about if you look up to somebody, whether it's your parent or a coach, and then one day they say something to you like, well, don't even bother with those dreams. That's never going to happen. if they say something like that, that has weight for us as a child, especially as a child who looks up to that person.
Yep.
And as a child who's coming into the world and trying to soak up everything, those early experiences really stick with us a lot more than when we grow up. And then we've had multiple experiences, contact with multiple people. But in the beginning, when we're learning about the world, those beliefs, they stick.
So as a forensic neuropsychologist, would it be accurate for me to ask you or suggest that as we're developing our beliefs, these neural patterns that get reinforced, in the early, whether it's imprinting or modeling or experiential years, the information, whether it's through our parents, our teachers, our schools, what we watch on television, or wherever it is that we're getting the information, that we really don't have the ability to choose right or wrong, good or bad, empowering or disempowering in a certain way or in a certain time in our life. And then whatever pattern is created and reinforced becomes our reality and then becomes the automatic way for us to think or to expect. Is that accurate from a forensic perspective?
Yes, that's an excellent analysis, John. And so I think what people don't realize is that as a child, you mentioned this a couple of times already in just what you spoke of, there is that sense of we're not in control, right? And we're not supposed to be as little children. We don't have as much control, as much agency as we do as adults. And so some of those beliefs, they stick for that reason, because we are really limited in some ways in terms of what we're exposed to at that time.
Yeah.
At the same time, there's a pattern of reinforcement. So once a belief is part of our thinking, when we see another experience, even if that experience actually gives you evidence against those thoughts, you're more likely to practice selective memory. You'll pick up on those pieces that confirm that existing belief. And if that's a negative belief, then that can be quite harmful for you. And you'll just remember that piece of the puzzle when you think back on that experience. And so in some ways, it's almost self-fulfilling, because every time you have an experience, you interpret it according to an existing framework. That framework gets stronger and stronger and stronger until you examine it and start to change it.
So we're basically, it's the confirmation biases that we have. And then we not only confirm what we believe, but then we believe what we confirm, and then we delete and distort anything else that may not line up with that framework, is what I just heard.
Exactly. And as adults, we actually have a lot of agency to have new experiences, to change our belief systems. But oftentimes as adults, even if some of those childhood beliefs don't apply anymore, we still come back to those, especially in times of stress. We're more likely to regress into that type of thinking. So sometimes people will say, well, most of the time I don't think that way. But when you're under stress, think about whether or not there's certain negative thought patterns that come up. I think for most people there are. And that's because you're going back in time almost to a time where you didn't feel as powerful. You didn't feel like you had as much agency. And those types of things start to cloud your judgment, and they can lead down this path of self-sabotage.
Love it. So I got the L and the I. Now I'm going to go to the F, which is the fears. So, I learned myself that, fear is like driving down the highway and all of a sudden a light pops up on your dash. It's just a signal. Most people don't take a hammer and hit the light. The signal just is a signal. It's something's going on to pay attention to. Now, fears, I know that there's 30, 40, 50 different types of main fear, like fear of failing. Fear of being embarrassed, ashamed, ridiculed, judged, fear of being unloved, fear of being alone, fear of rejection. These are a lot of the common fears that people move away from because it's an unpleasant feeling. And in many cases, we will either stay in our comfort zone or suppress with whether it's alcohol or drugs or feel-good chemicals, whatever the case might be. Let's talk about fear for just a moment. And let's maybe understand that fear is not your enemy, from my perspective. You can actually use fear. And I know one of your friends and our mutual friend, Dr. Joan Rosenberg, who's on